Hi, I'm Katie, and this is the Free Art and Design School podcast, web series, whatever. I have one of my favorite people on earth here today. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hey guys, my name is Samantha Wassmer, and I am very happy to be here.
You are so interesting to me because you have such a wealthy history of art education, art history education. You've developed your personal practice into this really beautiful poetic style that you've created. You do everything from like ballpoint pen sketches to paintings. You just started doing Rizzo printing. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you started being an artist.
Oh, well, I started being an artist in the sense that I was obsessed with art for the longest time, all kinds of art. I, for a long time, felt very disconnected from fine art. I felt much more like fine art being a very loose and kind of elitist term, but I felt very disconnected from fine art for the longest time. My first loves were music and theater, and that's what I did. And as I got older, I had the privilege of going to different museums and just kind of fell in love with the visual arts as well. But I would say that my love of it always kind of intersected these different forms of art all together. And then I went to college with you and took some art history classes, learned about incredible artists who not just like were not just ones who like went through traditional forms of schooling and everything, but people who were doing more conceptual art, people who were doing political art, all this kind of stuff. And I just kept on having this nagging thing in me where it's like I wanted to make stuff too. I always liked sketching, I always liked doodling, and I liked doing that in high school and stuff as people do, but I never took myself seriously. And then I think I just reached a point after, getting a degree and getting a master's and all this. I'm like, okay, well, I can just do this myself too. It doesn't need to be that serious. It does need to be something that is I all I need to do is take myself seriously. Is kind of my realization that I had with it. And what I really wanted was not necessarily a career in art, although that'd be great. And I think we're all trying to, or at least you and I know that at least definitely myself, I'm trying to find a way to have my creative practice also work into my career, but knowing that I can do art just to kind of feed myself and feed what I that urge, that kind of itch that I have to do something. And sometimes I'm better at listening to it than others. I definitely go, months sometimes without creating anything, but it's always there. And I think the important thing that I learned is just recognizing that you have that eye, that you have that like passion for taking things in that way and looking at it in an artistic and creative way. So much of it is that mindset. And so that's roundabout sort of way of how I got into it.
I'm wondering if, like, I don't know, I feel like most artists don't have an extensive art history background other than just like their own personal interests or artists that they love. Do you think having studied it so heavily and you worked at a museum? Yes.
Yes, I've
Yes.
worked in multiple. Yes.
Oh my God. Oh, that's right. Yeah. And you worked at the Dali Museum, right?
Yes, I
Oh
did.
my
Oh,
God.
well, I did docent work at the Dolly when I was in high school. So not necessarily, I didn't like work there, but then I did multiple like internships throughout the years during summers in LA, did Robert Rauschenberg Foundation for a summer working kind of on the more like curatorial archivist sort of role in something that's a bit more private. Worked in public museums in London, and then also another public museum here in St. Petersburg. So just a couple here and there.
Just a couple. Proceeds to list like several amazing achievements. That's so cool. Do you think having access to that kind of like wealth of historical knowledge has influenced your work, or is it more just like you personally love it and you think your practice is separate?
Oh, I mean, it can't be separate from me. My brain kind of brings it all together, and I think that so much of what I do, and sometimes to my detriment, because I think that sometimes I feel like, well, I'll talk about the ways in which it gets a bit hairy, and then I'll talk about the ways that I love it. Sometimes I think that I will have like this paralysis where it's like, well, it doesn't look like that, or it isn't what I want, or I have this idea of what I need and what I need to make, but I feel like it's too informed by something, or it doesn't really have my voice, or it just isn't coming out the way that I want it to. And I just don't feel like it's as like legitimate, whatever that means, as these other artists. But in the way that I love it, in the way that I can't like separate it, is that I just, so much of why I love art is in the way that it can become so many things once you give it to the public, once you share it with the public, or sometimes you don't. I mean, sometimes artists die and then you see all their journals and stuff. What I really love and get really obsessed by is the process, and not always the finished product. I always want to know how things came about. And I think that I have that curiosity of how. And for me, my understanding and appreciation of art and the art that I make is so much richer by understanding, or maybe not understanding, but having a glimpse into the lives of these artists and knowing the history around it, because everybody's influenced by their world and history. Because I think for me, art history is not just like the very strict, oh, this artist was born this year, went through these movements and these periods and stuff. It's the whole socio-political history that they're living in. You know, everybody's living in an age, everyone's influenced, everyone's got something happening to them, personal, interpersonal, like national, international, whatever it is. It's always, something's always influencing it, and it's all interconnected. And that I love looking at. I love, you know, tracing back, oh, you know, I wonder if they were really moved by this one political event or this social movement and then responded to that. And, you know, they met this one artist, and I love digging into that. You know, oh, I found out that they had happened to be at the same place at the same time as this other artist, and then their artwork looked differently after, and kind of tracing those sort of different nudges here and there based off of what's happening. So that to me is what the history involves, and that to me I think is how I can't separate it. You know, it's all together.
You love being a detective and giving the
Yeah,
fuller
yeah, a
picture.
little bit.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I think whenever you look at a painting, or not you, because you obviously have this perspective, but whenever the average person looks at the painting, they see the aesthetic of it and they don't think about sort of all of those layers behind it. I think people are better when like they see a movie and they're like, oh, this is from the 1940s. This is like the thing that was happening. But I think
Yeah.
often people don't have the resources or access to like think about paintings in that way, or they don't have
Yeah.
access to museums, or they, you know, are not curious about painting because it's this elitist thing.
It
When it's really,
shouldn't be a privilege. Oh, sorry, I don't mean to
oh
speak
no, no,
over.
no, continue. Yeah.
It shouldn't be a privilege, but it is. And I think that, you know, we can talk about it even on a larger scale. Like, context is so important. And it's so important for even just the person that you're talking to, understanding that they've got a context, they've got a past, they're coming from a different like stage in their life and what's going on in their mind. And the same applies to anybody who you're like intaking their art or their product.
Yeah.
Even like not even talking about art, like, but a product. Everything is created, well, I mean, talking about AI, it's a whole different thing, but like generally to this point, most things are created by humans
Yeah.
and are influenced with that like heart and emotion and messiness of that. And so I think it's, I mean, I feel really privileged that that was the education that I had slash was my takeaway from my education, was to look and ask these questions and to see. And I know that my experience is so much richer for asking these questions, but I mean, not a lot of people have that time to do that. Not a lot of people are given the right information sometimes. Not a lot of people get to speak with people who have this knowledge. And you know, I'm also a research nerd. Like, I really like looking into these things, and it's not out there all the time because people want to put really nice like clean narratives, and sometimes they need to, sometimes they want to, and it's hard to kind of toe that line. And it was something that I was really interested in when I was doing museum work, and when I was kind of spending some time being like a docent and a museum guide, meeting people where they were, knowing what kind of information they had, and then kind of sharing stories with them about the artwork that would help inform their understanding of it, help kind of have them have the context to empathize or to see where this piece might have come from.
Mm, yeah, you're reminding me a lot of Frank O'Hara, because he was a critic, museum worker, like
Mm.
art person, and during his lifetime, no one thought of him as a poet, which is so funny because that's what
Which
he,
is so wild, right?
right? Super crazy. And I think that's so interesting that like after he died, then now he's only remembered for being a poet, and then his like career as like an art adjacent person is always secondary.
Yeah.
But it's very hard to like put yourself in the shoes of um, when something is happening at its moment without the historical distance. And I think that's really cool that you're considering all of these different factors and lenses and like really trying to paint, so to speak, paint a picture of why art looks the way it does, why art feels the way it does, what it's responding to. I'm wondering if you actually look at yourself and your artwork that way, or whether you haven't gotten to that point yet where you can consider yourself to be part of the canon and influenced by different things.
Um, I mean, I know my influences in the sense that I know what I'm trying to emulate at the time. I don't know if I've really centered around what my like artistic voice is.
Mhm.
But I mean, I know where my like constellation kind of connections are and what's kind of fed one obsession versus another versus, you know, this piece or work or whatever you want to call it. But I don't know if I look at it that generously for myself, because I think that it's a very generous thing to do, to give that time and effort of trying to understand the full picture and the context in which anybody is saying something, giving something to you, presenting something to you. Uh, and that's a personal thing, you know, me trying to give myself that generosity. And also just that's a whole other level of taking my art seriously that I'll be honest, I haven't really reached because
You gotta do it. Your art's too good. I remember
yeah.
in college like 5 years ago where you're like, I'm not an artist. And I was like, what the fuck are you talking about? But it's I
I've
think
gotten better. I mean, I'll at least cop to that one.
good. Yeah, and I think it's a process for everyone. I think a lot of artists really struggle with whether to self-identify as an artist, whether to like take themselves seriously, not in an egotistical way, but like you said, like give yourself the grace to like make something and then have a distance from it, be able to evaluate it as an actual art piece, and then figure out how to get better, whatever that
And
means
you know,
is.
I'll tell you something that I've been like really playing with in my mind a lot. And it makes me think a lot of like artist history and what I studied in school. My dad died in February, so a couple months ago, and I have been struggling to kind of make art since then because I feel like I've got this shadow of this, not even shadow, it's like this huge pressing emotional thing that every now and I mean, for the longest time, I just didn't want to make anything. I didn't see the, I mean, I knew that I was going to eventually, but I didn't really know how to like do anything with all these big emotions. And I still don't really know, but like I've started to kind of dip my toe into it again. And it's hard for me to figure out where to channel that. And I haven't been very generous with myself and what to do because anything that I've made feels particularly, it feels too trite, you know, it feels too contrived. I'm like, oh, this is being influenced by like my dad's unexpected death or something. But for some reason, when we're talking about proper artists and all
Yeah.
these things, we're able to so clearly see the way that they've been impacted. And you know, I know that I've been moved by artworks, music pieces, films that people have made in the wake of losing a loved one. Like that has spoken to me so much. And I keep such an eye out for the portrayal and expression of grief now. It's something entirely different to me than it was before. And I am so interested in how I can do that for myself, not just to like put out, not even to put out in the world, to be honest, just for myself, just to express that. And it's it's something that I grapple with. And you talking about context and thinking about somebody's history and all these things influencing them, it's hard. I don't know, it's making my brain think about this in a different way,
Yeah.
because there's such a uh it's not confidence, it's just it's automatically validated when you're saying about, you know, you don't challenge it when another artist is talking about, oh yeah, it's been influenced by that. You're like, oh yeah, of course, how could it not be? But for me, I haven't found the way to really have that come out. It's just doesn't feel right. You know, it feels too contrived, or it doesn't feel like it's there at all, and it feels like I'm kind of making a huge, like, I don't know, diversion around it. um Hopefully I'll figure that out sometime.
And you will. And you know, like everything else, grief is a process and it takes time, and it will influence you in ways you have never expected. Not to grief explain to you, who is literally
No, 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 no. I'm not. That's not the. Believe me, that's not an issue. Um, Funnily enough, I've been most kind of interested in the one time that I made something that I really felt was kind of feeding that for me. It was so strange. I never really expected it. Was I for my birthday, my partner Malcolm and I went away and to like a beach town, just the two of us, and like had no plans. And we just spent an afternoon like collecting really small shells. And I had a really fun time like making just listening to music. He loved collecting the shells because he really likes doing that. He'd hand it to me and I just arrange it in like a little mandala, and I put it on a towel and I just took a picture of it. And that felt the most like I was expressing
mm,
my artistic self. And I just, it was the most random thing. I don't know why. I don't know how to trace that back to my dad really, but for some reason that felt really cathartic to me. And I don't, and like I have no other kind of record of it other than the photo on a beach towel that I did. And I'm trying to think of how to like replicate that, but you're right, it does come in very unexpected ways, and I'll keep you updated on how that
yeah.
pans out.
Well, sometimes your heart just needs something meditative, and like a different practice or medium can really open yourself up to different ways of thinking and feeling. I
It's
think
true.
like the thing that's helped me sort of consider myself an artist is like to imagine 100 years from now, if someone was looking through my stuff and like how to evaluate me and look at the things that I was interested in, my values, my passions, my philosophy, like someone in the future might write an essay about me, like maybe, you know?
I
And
hope they do.
I hope they do too. But I think that's sort of helpful, is like to imagine yourself as an actual art figure and someone else 100 years from now doing the art history work
Oh,
like
that just
you.
stresses me out, to be honest. I'm just
Well,
like, oh my God, I don't want people examining me that closely.
but your work is good enough that it's going to happen, whether you want it to or not.
That's true. Who knows whether or not these artists wanted me to be talking about them and their influences and their
Oh,
life and in interpersonal life and everything too. It's gotta pay it forward if it comes.
well, that's why it's important to do things like this, like to have a recording of your insights and to write as much as possible, and so that you can be the one
Yes.
explaining.
Yeah, I have been missing writing so much, and it's been so when my dad died, I started, you know, a grief journal, as plenty of people do, in the sense where I just wanted to. I had such a hard time remembering things, and I still do right now. And I was starting to write things down, and sometimes it was too hard and too painful, and sometimes it was, you know, took forever. And I just kind of let it fall away. And I miss doing that practice of writing. It's been an itch again that I've been wanting to scratch. So thanks for cueing that for me.
Course. And you have to write. You're such a good writer. You're so thoughtful. Again, you have all this training of like art history that helps you analyze and evaluate artists and their motives. So applying that to yourself is, it's maybe a graceful thing to do for you too, rather than a scary one. And maybe you and other artists need to like reframe it as like, instead of an act of ego, it's an act of like love, self-love. Um,
Mm,
because life is too short not to give yourself the self-love and to
that's
treat
very
yourself
true.
with love. So I'm
Very
wondering,
true.
um, what are some of your like big artistic and visual artistic influences right now that you've been thinking a lot about?
Oh, that's so hard. How far can I go out right now in terms of like like as far as okay. Um, well, always top of mind, especially with the whole grief thing, is Joan Didion's The Year of Magical Thinking. Um, and just so many lines from that really kind of just play in my head nonstop. Really have been just thinking about the way that she writes, um, and the level of like clarity and probably authority, whether warranted or not, that she writes. I mean, when she's writing about her own life, it's a totally different thing, but that's something that I think I could probably channel a bit more. Um, love Joni Mitchell always and forever. And so just listening to her has always been, again, another very generous confessional artist that's kind of unabashed about, flaws and imperfections and everything. And that I super respect. Um, visually, oh God, that's hard. I've been spending too much time in kind of design mode, and not that that's a bad thing, but it's just I haven't been really intaking visual art in the way that I had been hoping to. Um, gosh, I was just thinking about this and I'm trying to uh wow, this is embarrassing that I can't right now.
Oh my God, nothing embarrassing.
I
What you
mean,
were
I
just
know that
talking about accepting imperfections and flaws.
I know I was. I know I was. I like, but I know I like have lists of all these artists that I have
Yeah,
loved and always loved and all this stuff, but it's sometimes it's hard for me to remember when I'm on the spot like this. Um,
sorry, I'm a bad friend.
no, no, you're so fine. I just like also want to like say good people. Like I just want to make sure that I'm like talking about the people that like I really want to be talking about, and I know I'm gonna get off this call and be like, I can't believe I forgot them. I just can't believe I forgot them. Um, music wise, alongside Joni Mitchell is going to be kind of left field, but like I love SZA. I think that she
Yeah,
is a fantastic, incredible writer and just like performer. And I mean, Control will always be one of my favorite albums, and SOS is really great too. And I've just really enjoyed that and listening to that every now and then. Um, I I wow. I don't know why I'm having such a hard time right now
I mean that actually
remembering visual artists.
makes it
I do, well, yeah, sorry. I feel like so much of what I like I have images of like what I think
yeah.
is very so I have this art mentor that I talk to every couple of months who's based in London. Her name is Perry Ann,
Mhm.
Christian, and she's an artist in her own right, absolutely fantastic. And we were talking about one of her shows that she did, where a lot of her work is very ethereal, very kind of abstract. It's super beautiful, um, and I. She was telling me about this like very small show that she did in a lighthouse, I think somewhere in the UK. I can't remember exactly where she took different kinds of like waters that had
Mhm.
different types of kind of herbs or taken from different places, and people were supposed to kind of drink that water and like, write about what that felt like to them. And it's something about that was really interesting to me, and it's just been kind of like playing around in my head, this idea of art not just being something you look at on the wall, but also kind of sharing an experience and like kind of just doing the practice of really thinking about what you're doing and what you're taking or eating or looking at or something like that, and just taking the time to think about that. um that's just been playing in my brain, just like a kind of like revisit that every now and then. And then I have always and will forever love Do Hosa. He is an artist that does the most incredible large scale installations, um, where he takes one to one kind of replica um, installations of homes that he's lived in. Sorry, we're like running
Oh
out of
yeah,
time and
no,
I've
I
been taking so
no,
long
you're
for
not
this.
running. Oh my God.
Um,
You're so good.
And something about like memory and the idea of just so lovingly taking every single inch of this place that you used to live in and recreating it in these beautiful colors that just are very, it's kind of like a gauzy almost silk fabric. I can't remember the name of it. It's a very specific material that means a lot to him and his culture, and I apologize, I can't remember it off the cuff right now, but that I think about all the time. And I always love that kind of commitment to memory and sharing that with somebody. That one's really beautiful. I've been thinking a lot about washes of color for
Yeah.
some reason, just really layers and washes of color, different transparencies. Those are the kind of things that are like playing in my mind right now.
Two things to say. One, I'm
Yeah.
actually obsessed with your when I asked you who are your visual influences, that you list off so many non-visual influences, because I think that shows how your brain works. And you're one of the artists that I love who's like so connected. Like your brain is such a perfect three-dimensional web of influences, and that you can take something poetic or musical and then turn it into a visual piece of art that's also poetic and musical. Like I don't think I have any, I love music, but it never influences my art. So I'm always amazed by people whose brains work differently like yours. And I think that's really magical. I also, speaking of washes and transparency, I was going to ask about this piece behind you in your background and
Oh,
whether it's yours or not yours.
no, I wish that it was. I'll be honest, I just pulled this off of Pinterest because I loved the way that it looked, and I needed a background that was like, I felt wasn't going to be like a super boring, like picture of some island, but also not like a blurred background. I don't know. I just wanted something pretty to look at that wasn't going to be too distracting. So I can't credit the artist here. I apologize. I think it's risograph, and I just love the way, what I think this is of is just like the light coming through the trees on an asphalt road. I think that's what it is.
Oh, okay.
And I just love that. I love the way that they captured it. I've always been trying, like, I just love staring out and looking at the way that the light plays on plants and things like that. And so this capturing that is just always super pleasing to me and just seems very meditative and beautiful and kind of, the imbuing beauty in the everyday kind of like thing.
But that's what your art is, and not in a funny way. Like your work, so much of it, when I say it's poetic, like you really do find the beauty in the mundane, and not mundane, but like peeling an orange or like stamps or like so many of your, and I know that you're just doing these like as sketches, like in a sketchbook. I know you're like, I don't even know how it's possible to take so much beauty and then make it into something so like simple and like, I don't know, honed down in the way that you do. But um maybe you can talk a little bit about that, your little weird drawings.
Yeah. So I got really into doing these blue sketches where, just drawing in blue. I think it's like drafting pencil, like architectural pencil, because the graphite I'm not a super fan of. It just gets too smudgy for me. I know you can go in like harder, levels and everything, but it's, I don't know, I was never really a big graphite person. And ink sometimes I like doing, but it's not as forgiving. Like, I mean, depending on what kind of ink you're doing, I oscillate sometimes because sometimes I really like the strong marks. But I found for like when I was just kind of sketching everyday things, there was this, one period of my life where I was working a job that I kind of like meh about. And so I took my full lunch break every single day. And when I did that, I just kind of committed to sketching every time during my break. And so it was whatever I could see that I was really interested in. And most of the time I was just trying to kind of like hone my skills, because I just am always trying to hone my skills in like an obsessive way. And I just really liked doing these blue sketches, and they just kept on coming back, and they keep coming back. Every time I like think that I'm going to put it away, it's kind of what I gravitate towards is the easiest, most satisfying thing. It's not, I mean, it's still a sketch at the end of the day. Or I mean, it's what I call it, but like I think it's still kind of a sketch at the end of the day. But it feels very satisfying to me in the same way that like making those shells kind of feels very satisfying to me. Um, I mean, it's a very generous way that you worded it, in the sense that like it's kind of a meditation on like what I'm doing in the everyday sort of mundane things. Um, but yeah, I just like the look of it. And I have played with using different colors, and I really like the idea of layering. I'm super
Mhm.
obsessed with like collage and printmaking and paper works in general. And so I am always kind of thinking about how I might be able to incorporate that blue sketch with other things. But yeah, that one I can't really get rid of, and I don't really know why.
Well, I'm happy you haven't. I think a lot of artists, me especially, will like get really into a medium for like a month and then just never come back to it. And then it's
I
like,
mean, I do that too, but yeah.
but I'm glad the blue pencil sketches aren't one of them. They really each one feels like a visual poem because you have a few motifs. The way they're related to each other is really interesting. Often there are immediate connections. Sometimes the connections take a little bit longer to realize. Um,
Yeah.
and it feels like such an encapsulation of your personality. Um, well, you are more energetic. I feel like the pieces are very like calm and serene, and then as soon as you're talking, you're like bursting full of ideas and passion and energy, which is one of the main reasons that I wanted to talk to you because like in a moment's notice, you turn it on and you're just like, here's all the stuff that I'm thinking about.
Well, it's easy to talk about this stuff. I mean, I could just go on forever. You ask me questions that kind of like feed properly into what I want to talk about, but I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I don't really, that's an interesting bridge that I haven't really had the chance to. I've always thought about, and I don't really know how to bridge, because sometimes I have big emotions. I'm a big emotion kind of person, and I've always kind of wondered how to get those big emotions into my work, but the work always ends up being much calmer. You're right. I don't, the blue sketches are always far more meditative and kind of poetic, to use your word, which I don't mind. But every now and then I'm just like really envious of artists that can just like go and just like make it and big marks and big things, and just it feels like that must be so cathartic. But I've just never done that, because I always want, at least I gravitate more to elements of softness again, and haven't quite gotten to the root of that one.
You just need some big paper and some paint and just gotta let loose. Gotta
Yeah,
do the opposite of what you've been doing.
I know, it's and I do believe that like if I were to do that, they both, I mean, everything informs itself and each other, and nothing comes from nowhere. Everything kind of flows into each other. And so I know that working on that will really help me kind of see more things about the subtle blue drawings and how I might be able to connect the two or not connect the two or whatever it is. But yeah, anyways.
Ah, I love it. I love talking to you. It's been too long. You're
I
amazing.
know.
Like seriously, I don't know, you have such a wonderful perspective on art and art making, and you're so selfless and you're so kind. And I just think it's a real treasure to have you as a friend and to be able to see your work. And it's sad that grief is now like a large component of what you're going through, but it's also nice to see you being able to make work and use art as a way to process your emotions. I think art is one of the few things we have in life that really help with
It's
that.
what you need. I mean, why? I mean, this is not me. Someone else has said this before, probably in a speech or something, but like when oddly enough, I think it's Ethan Hawke who like had like a, big speech about it. But basically, when people are in grief, when people are in love, when all these people, big things happen, people gravitate to art, whether it's music or literature or visual art or what, it's always art. No one's like, look, let me exchange some stocks, I'm in love.
Yeah.
It's not what feeds you.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really beautiful place to end this. And I love you. I love your work. And I'm glad that I got to talk to you about it all.
Love you too. Thank you, Katie, for everything you do.
That's my job.